Hey, how's it going, Bible Talk family? Welcome back to Bible Talk with BW, where we read scripture, we observe it, and we apply it to our lives. Today is Genesis 25. That's what we're going to be going through. There's a lot to this chapter, and I'm excited to get into it. I'm going to share some things I've learned and maybe some things that I haven't seen, but maybe I'll see right now, or stories. But just going to have a good time going through this chapter with you guys. So that being said, let's get into it. Genesis 25. Abraham had taken another wife, whose name was Zechariah. She bore him Zimron, Jokshan, Medan, Midian, Ishbak, and Shua. So we see Keturah is Abraham's new wife, and Abraham waited, and the word Keturah means it means fragrance, I believe. It's almost like it was a good smell to Abraham. It was a joyful thing. And then we see these sons that they had together, and there's something so interesting about the meanings of these that there's a couple things that I want to talk about. The first, so we'll go in order. The name Zimron means song. Like when we come to Christ, it's like a song of refreshment. We feel joy and peace and love, and we go in order. This is what can happen in my walk and in your walk. We see Jokshan means snare. There's snares in our lives, and we see Medan means strife. The snares will lead to strife, and Midian means will leave. Like I just said, strife will lead us to leave, and then Ishbak, I forgot what Ishbak means, but Shua means from the pit. So we go in order, and what's even more interesting about this than our own walk is just how the Bible says the end times will be. It says there's going to be that millennial period, that 1,000-year period of peace, and everything will be right like it was in the garden. We'll see the lion lying down with the lamb, and we'll see babies being able to play with scorpions and snakes, and there won't be any thing that we're going through right now. And then that 1,000-year period we see in Revelation, that it's going to cause strife and content. People are going to get bored with things being right, and there's going to be a rebellion. They won't be able to turn away from Jesus while he's here for that 1,000-year period, but then for a short time, Satan will be released once more, and a few of those people, because you got to think people will live for 1,000 years during that time. There's going to be a lot of people, but things will be right. And so there's going to be a group of people who are bored with things being right, and so they choose to follow Satan. And then at the end of that, we see Satan and his followers are going to be thrown into the pit at the end of Revelation, or before the new heaven and the new earth. And so as we read the Bible, these names are so interesting to me, because it can be both our walk with the Lord. There's a song, and then we have peace and love. The Bible says there's peace and love. In Romans 14:7, it says we have righteousness, peace, and joy. And then we'll see, when we come to the Lord, there's a sense of prosperity. And then some people, myself included, we just fall into these snares. It seems like things come our way that is a snare to us, or the things that we once did that we no longer do become enticing again. We look at those things that we used to do and kind of miss them in a way. And I know I've experienced that. And then what can follow that is, contentment, and that's the word I'm looking for. Strife, and then what follows that is being thrown into the pit of depression. The Bible warns us against that, and he tells us, we have Jesus who is always there, who's always ready to take us back, who's always ready to pull us out of the pit of depression. And I just find these names so interesting, and I wish I would have kind of went over that a little more in my head before I started talking about it, but hopefully I kind of explain that a little bit. And we're going to get into those stories as we go through, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Revelation, some of those books that talk about the millennial period and the tribulations and all that fun, interesting stuff. And one more thing I want to mention is Revelation. People look at Revelation in their first sense, their first goal is to point outwards at people. The book of Revelation, the word means reveal. And it's not so much, it is about eschatology, but more than that, it's about our own personal walk. It talks about church history. Everybody's had a church history. It talks about what we've liked in the church, what we didn't like, what God likes, what God doesn't like in certain places. It talks about, we all go through trials, not those trials that are going to happen at the end, but we all go through trials in our life. And then we come out of that walking with the Lord and things are right. And that's how we need to read the book of Revelation. Yeah, there's an eschatological, oh man, I can't speak. An eschatological meaning behind it about the end times. But more than that, it's to prepare us and to show us, to reveal what God has done in our lives. I'm getting way, way, way off track. But yeah, I just find these names interesting and look into them more. But as we go through the Bible, we'll see this. All right, so let's get back into the story. Jokshan was the father of Sheba and Dedan. The descendants of Dedan were the Asherites, the Letushites, and the Lemites. The sons of Midian were Ephah, Epher, Henoch, Abida, and Eldah. All these were descendants of Keturah, which Keturah is the new wife that Abraham has taken on. Abraham left everything he owned to Isaac. Remember, Abraham is the type of the father. Isaac is the type of the son. Jesus and God. God gave everything he had to his son. In John 17, it says, the father gives all he has to his son. It says, but while he was still living, he gave gifts to the sons of his concubines and sent them away from his son Isaac to the land of the east. Abraham lived 175 years. Quickly going back to this, God gives everything to his son. We're in verse 8, but verse 5. Man, if we can give everything we do to Jesus, it can just make our days go so much easier. No matter what your job is, if you're if you're a plumber, you can bless every home you go to. I work in the parks department right now. I can ask a blessing for every park I take care of, every park I mow, the families I see playing. And when you look at things like that, all of a sudden you're blessing a ton of people and your job becomes so much more enjoyable. Maybe you're done working and you could just get to walk around your neighborhood and bless your neighborhood through prayer. And man, there's so much joy to be found when we give whatever we do to the Lord, but everything outside of that is just emptiness. And that's something that I'm learning and still have to learn as I go through day to day. But just something that came to my mind is, man, if we take our jobs and give it to the Lord as we work, it becomes so much more enjoyable. Then Abraham breathed his last and died a good old age. The King James Version here says, Abraham died full. And then if you look at King James, there's italics there. It says died full. And they put in a full old age. But that wasn't there originally. The text just said Abraham died full. And man, how good is that? To just walk with the Lord your entire life and to just die full of his joy and love. Man, there's something so beautiful about seeing um, older people who are glowing for the Lord. I think about my grandpa and grandma, and man, when they talk about the Lord, they just glow. And my grandpa's never been one to really share a lot of things, but when you can get him talking about his prayer life and you can get him talking about what the Lord's done in his life, you can just see a glow about him. And that's going to be my goal, is just, I want to die a wise old man. And you don't just wake up one day and are wise. That's a lifelong journey. So it says, he died an old man full of years, and he was gathered to his people. Who are your people? Who's going to gather around you? Is it going to be the church? Who do you associate yourself with? His people were just good people. And I love, so in the King James, it says, in the days of the years. So it's saying, in the King James, I don't have it in front of me, so I'm trying to go off memory. But it says, the days of the years that Abraham lived. And of course, the NIV changes a lot of things, but I love that phrase, the days of the years, because that refers to Abraham living for God day by day. And that's a Hebrew phrase that they used because our lives aren't made up of years. Our lives are made up of days. What are you doing today? What are you going to do tomorrow? Are you going to live for the Lord? Are you going to have a prayer life? Are you going to walk in the Spirit? And we get to make that decision every single day. So, and he was gathered to his people. His sons Isaac and Ishmael. I love this too. His sons Isaac and Ishmael buried him in the cave of Machpelah near Mamre. So we haven't heard about Ishmael in a while. And I love that after Abraham died, these two brothers came back together. There's something about dying that brings people together. There's a huge lesson in relationships there. I see so many people fighting these days with one another. And a lot of it's because nobody's willing to die. Jesus said, if you want to follow him, you got to take up your cross and follow him. But that phrase, taking up your cross, it's not like the burdens you go through. It's not the tests we go through. Taking up your cross is what you're going to lay down for another person. And we see Abraham died and it brought his children together. Are you willing to be the one in your marriage to die? You don't always have to be right. You don't have to get your way all the time. Are you willing to die so that you can come together? There'll be a coming together when you die to yourself. And there's just so much in this chapter. It's so good. There's a whole another lesson right there that I could talk about. But let us be one. You get to make that decision. And dying means just that. It means you drop it. If you poke a dead person, they're not going to feel it. That's how you know if you've died to the situation, if you've died to yourself. If somebody pokes at you, you don't feel it because you've died to that. You've let that go. So in the field of Ephron, son of Zahor, the Hittite, the field Abraham had bought from the Hittites. Remember, that was in our last story. There Abraham was buried with his wife Sarah. After Abraham's death, God blessed his son Isaac, who then lived near Beer Lahai Roi. So now we're going to get into Isaac's life, but we got to conclude Ishmael's life. So it says, this is the account of the family line of Abraham's son Ishmael, whom Sarah's slave Hagar the Egyptian bore to Abraham. So it's just going to go through Ishmael's sons, because it needs to conclude Ishmael's life, because uh, man, the New Testament talks about it, but it's coming to an end of the flesh and getting into the life of Isaac, or the type of Jesus. Ishmael is the type of the flesh, and now we're getting into the type of Jesus. But they're the names of the sons of Ishmael, listed in the order of their birth. Nebaleth, the firstborn of Ishmael; Kedar, Abil, Midsam, Kishma, Dema, Massa, Hadad, Tema, Chetur, Naphish, and Kedema. These were the sons of Ishmael, and these are the names of the 12 tribal rulers according to their settlements and camps. Ishmael lived 137 years. Now, we see this word, so he breathed his last and died. This word died here, I can't remember what it is, but it's a different word. It means fell. But the word used for Abraham when it says Abraham died is a different word than what Ishmael used. Abraham's died means full. Abraham was full when he died, but Ishmael just says he fell. And he was gathered to his people. His descendants settled in the area from Havilah to Shur, near the eastern border of Egypt, as you go toward Ashur, and they lived in hostility toward all the tribes related to them. They were just a group of people who liked to fight. These are the Arab people today. We're going to see just conflict with and problems with these tribes, with the Israelites, and there still is to this day. I've been to Israel. I've been to Jordan. They don't like each other. Our guides couldn't go into Jordan. They had to stay in Israel, and we had new guides when we got into Jordan. And it was an interesting place, because outward looking in, it seemed like it was cool. It was a cool trip, but man, there was just something off about it. It was just a feeling. It was like, I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but going to a friend's house when you were younger and knowing, just feeling like there was a dysfunction in the family, and then leaving that family and going back to your own home, it was just like a feeling of peace. And now that's really what it felt like when we went to Jordan. Like it was a good time, but there was just something about it. And then when we got into Israel, man, it just felt like we went home. That's the best way I can describe it. But there's just a hostility between these two people. So now we get into Jacob and Esau. This is verse 19. This is the account of the family line of Abraham's son Isaac. Abraham became the father of Isaac, and Isaac was 40 years old when he married Rebekah. Daughter of Bethuel and Aramean from Padan Aram, and sister of Laban and Aramean. Isaac prayed to the Lord on behalf of his wife because she was childless. The King James Version says barren, and I like that word more, because of where she is. She married into Isaac's family, and there's people who are married into our faith, and they're just barren. They're going to church, but they don't feel anything. And I love that Isaac prayed for his wife. Let that be a lesson. Guys, are you praying for your wife? Wives, are you praying for your husband who doesn't yet believe Jesus? Because if you do, and there's just a blessing there. And Paul talks about that. Wives, pray for your husbands, and husbands, pray for your wives. Isaac prayed to the Lord on behalf of his wife because she was childless. The Lord answered his prayer, and his wife Rebekah became pregnant. God hears prayers. The babies jostled each other within her, and she said, "Why is this happening to me?" So she went to inquire of the Lord. I talked about this last Tuesday. I wanted to get into more of this on Wednesday, but time just got away from me. But man, when you come to the Lord, your spirit is awakened, and now there's just a war inside of us between our flesh and our spirit. And the one that we feed is going to be the one that leads our life, and the Bible says to walk in the Spirit. And by doing that, we can tame our flesh. One of them leads to life and the other one leads to death. The Lord said to her, 2 nations are in your womb, and 2 peoples from within you will be separated. One people will be stronger than the other, and the older will serve the younger. When the time came for her to give birth, there were twin boys in her womb. The first to come out was red, and his whole body was like a hairy garment. So they named him Esau. Esau means hairy. He was a hairy boy. After this, his brother came out with his hand grasping Esau's heels. So he was named Jacob. Jacob means heel snatcher. Isaac was 60 years old when Rebekah gave birth to them. The boys grew up, and Esau became a skillful hunter. Esau was a man's man. He loved the outdoors. He loved to hunt game. He loved to cook his venison. A man of the open country, while Jacob was content to stay at home among the tents. Jacob was a chef. He loved to be in the kitchen. He loved to stay home. Probably had smooth hands. He was a city slicker, so to speak. And we see he was kind of cunning. He was very clever. He was very crafty and getting what he wants, as we're going to see as we go through the story. But it says, Isaac, who had a taste for wild game, loved Esau, but Rebekah loved Jacob. I love that. Isaac loved Esau because he could hunt. But it just says Rebekah loved Jacob. The flesh always tries to make an excuse to love things. But man, the Lord just loves us because he loves us. And that's a good thing. And I love it says, while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. Man, he just loves us. We don't have to do anything to earn his love. We don't need to be good at hunting or be the best in our job. And the Lord just loves us for who we are. And he loves us so much that he died for us on the cross. And that's what it says here. It says, Isaac, who had a taste for wild game, loved Esau because his son was a hunter. But Rebekah loved Jacob. Once when Jacob was cooking some stew, Esau came in from the open country, famished. He said to Jacob, "Quick, let me have some of that red stew." He's being dramatic. I don't know if you have brothers, but we can tend to get dramatic. And I don't know about you guys, but when my little brother always had food, man, I just had to have a bite of it. "I'm famished. That is why he was also called Edom." Jacob replied, "First, sell me your birthright." We see his cunning come out. "Hey, sell me that birthright of yours, and I'll give you some of this too." "Look, I am about to die," Esau said. "What good is the birthright to me?" He's saying, "All right, you can take it. Just give me something to eat." The birthright, as we're going to see, was sold. It was given to the oldest son, but it was their job to be the minister of the family. And we see Esau could care less about that. He was saying, you can have it. I don't need that. I just want to go out and hunt. Sure, you can be the minister of the family. I don't care about that stuff. But Jacob said, "Swear to me first." So he swore an oath to him, selling his birthright to Jacob. And for all the things Jacob had against him, his trickery, his scheming, he wanted to be the spiritual leader. He had that going for him. Then Jacob gave Esau some bread and some lentil stew. He ate and drank and then got up and left. So Esau despised his birthright. Man, we see after he ate, we see that he realized what he had done, and he saw that a 10-second decision changed the course of his life. And we think, that's not a big deal, but there's a huge lesson in this. What we decide to do, 10 seconds can change our lives dramatically. The decisions we make can change our lives dramatically. And we see this 10-second conversation between Esau and Jacob changed Esau's life for the worse. And this is the beginning of their conflict with one another. That's the end of chapter 25. There's a lot in here. I tried to do my best to explain everything I was thinking about as I was reading through this, and hopefully you guys enjoyed that, learned something, and yeah, I appreciate you guys' time, and next week we'll continue on with this story in Genesis 26. So, all right, until next time.